Hi, I'm Andy Himmel with the Restaurant CPAs. I'm thrilled to have David Toth, partner at Winding River Consulting, join me today. I've been wanting to do this interview for a long time. David has worked extensively with accounting firms to help define their niches and plan strategically for the future. David, thank you for joining me today.
Awesome, Andy. I'm looking forward to talking everything restaurants.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Let's just jump right in.
Yeah,
Across industries, can you talk about how the accounting profession is shifting towards specialization and what's driving that trend?
yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost is I've been a follower of the restaurant CPA business quite for some time. So I'm really excited to finally get on this podcast. And I think the importance of what you guys provide in terms of matching, restaurant owners and operators with amazing accounting firms is such a needed thing. And, I wanted to bring this back to your question around why is specialization becoming top of mind for accounting firms and quite frankly, anything in the advisory space. And I think ultimately there's three core drivers to what's causing this to happen. And the first is top of mind for everybody. It's technology, right?
Right.
Technology is changing so rapidly in every industry, specifically restaurants, for example, when it comes to how I get communicated. Your table's ready. They're sending you a text message today. The way POS systems are working. It's just fascinating to see how are restaurants augmenting, right, their business models when it comes to technology. And I think equally the same when accounting firms are dealing with niche industries like the restaurant space, they have to become experts at that technology as an advisor to the organization. So technology is really transforming the way we have to think about businesses, how they're being operated, especially one that's such people oriented like the restaurant space. And so knowing that you have to understand how that's impacting your business really becomes a game changer when you're finding a partner that's helping you with your financials, your profitability, your accounting metrics. So number one is just this idea of technology. And number two is just today, the current state. We came out of pandemic. The way people consumed at restaurants has evolved so significantly. Takeout, DoorDash, Uber Eats, margins have become tighter because of tariffs, because of cost of goods. So all of these things that are creating more sophistication and complexity within your market and ecosystem requires higher level of expertise, which requires firms, and we'll talk more about this later, I believe, but firms really investing into industries to best understand their business model. And then the third pillar to this is that so much what has driven relationships in accounting space is who you knew down the street, who was recommended to you locally. And that was exactly how accounting firms have come to fruition over the last 100 years. But today, it has to go beyond just tax compliance and strategy. It has to have somebody that you feel as an advisor to your business and can think about the bigger picture beyond just the compliance work itself. And the reality is, your local CPA, the relationship-based CPA that's in your local market, if they don't have that specialty or that expertise or somebody on their team that's spending a lot of their time in that area, they're just not going to be able to bring the same level of sophistication to you as an opportunity. And with no geographic boundaries needed anymore, Zoom, podcasting, Teams, etc., being able to find an accounting firm that specializes in this space can really make the difference.
Are you seeing tax compliance is more of a prerequisite? That's something that accounting firms simply just do now because they need to. But what really differentiates a valuable accounting firm from just an accounting firm or from a generalist is everything else. And is what does that look like?
Yeah, I think what you're really talking about here is kind of this idea of a transactional versus trusted advisor. Hey, I'm looking for somebody just to be transactional. I'm going to give you my documents and my information. I own one restaurant. It's a small business. I'm happy with the relationship. The price point's exactly what I'm looking for. And that's all that I need. And those are out there. It's becoming a little bit harder to find. And part of that reason is because there's a talent crunch in the accounting space. We've seen a huge decrease in the number of graduates going and becoming a CPA for a lot of different reasons. We're not here to talk about that necessarily today, but more so understand that because there is a talent crunch, because there's a lack of people going into this profession right now, firms have had to become very transactional. But at the same time, it's also harder to find CPAs going forward. And so as I think about what I'm going to need that's best going to support my business, I need to look beyond, hey, do I really want to develop a relationship with somebody that's an expertise in that space that can add more
Right.
value to my organization? Because the reality is they know your financials. They know the pulse, the heartbeat to your organization. They should be able to provide more value to you beyond just a transactional relationship in the compliance space.
Sure. Um, you've seen firms build deep expertise in verticals like manufacturing, restaurants, nonprofit. Um, we've touched on this, but what really drives that trend, and why does that matter for clients? And maybe some examples, or be more specific.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think number one is noise. There is so much noise out there today. For example, very timely, we saw the Big Beautiful Bill Act get signed into Congress earlier this week, late last week. And there's a lot of information in there that needs to be deciphered and filtered through. And that's not your job as a restaurant owner to do it. Rather, it's the expertise in those firms that are. And so as we think about all of this noise, the more regulatory requirements, the technology, the sophistication of marketplaces, and how businesses are transforming in their each specific industry or area of expertise. It's not as easy thinking about it from a big picture and transactional perspective of where you can actually add value. And so when we look at construction, or we look at manufacturing, or we look at the hospitality or restaurant business, what we're seeing is a large volume of firms really doubling down on an industry first, specialization first approach. It's more relatable. It breaks down geographic borders. And even thinking about your background and some of the restaurants you had, Andy, I mean, you had a relationship with an accounting firm 10 years ago that was doing this, that was way ahead of their time. And I see so many firms trying to catch up to that today.
Yeah, it completely changed the course of my business. For the first time, my industry was shrinking. I was able to meet people across the country. It completely opened my eyes to things that I had no idea existed beyond, the small market that
That
I was
transactional
operating in.
relationship. You
Yeah,
gave them your work, you gave them your papers, they did the tax return, and that was what you knew them for. And today I think that's evolving so rapidly, where firms have the ability to bring outsourced bookkeeping and accounting services. You can't find a controller, you can't find a bookkeeper, you can't find a CFO. Accounting firms are starting to help on that advisory side of the relationship. You got all these POS systems that you could potentially pick from or choose from. How does that factor into your tax strategy? And potentially on amortizing certain types of equipment, right? So this is where those experts that live and breathe these industries, these areas, every day, can really start adding more value to your business.
sure. So a specialized firm, how are they structured differently internally compared to maybe how a generalist accounting firm? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I
what
mean,
have you seen in your experience?
I think it depends on the size of firm you're working with. Ultimately, you have quite larger firms with lots of capabilities. Some firms that are a little bit more boutique, that focus more on the relationship side of it. But what you're seeing is firms that can offer advisory services, managed IT services, consulting in the HR space. Right, that's not something as a restaurant owner you specialize in, but having a relationship or a partner that can bring that to the table becomes very critical. So I think the way accounting firms are trying to shift is, instead of going to market as a service, tax, audit, compliance, advisory, they're going to market with expertise in industries, restaurants, accounting, manufacturing, hospitality, construction. And so that's really the big pivot or shift. And typically you'll have a practice leader in that industry that really cares and is very passionate about it. When you were talking a little bit about the relationship you had with your accounting firm back in the day, SS&G, they had 75 dedicated people, if not less, plus or minus, just focused in that space. And you felt a level of comfort that you could get more from that relationship beyond just the
I
traditional
frankly
market.
didn't even know they had other divisions. All
Yeah.
I knew was the restaurant division, and I felt like I
Yeah.
knew almost all 75 of their team members and knew
Yeah.
them well, and I've kept in touch with many of them.
And until you actually go through that experience, Andy, like, you don't realize what you can unlock from a growth potential. And also as a business owner and entrepreneur, you don't have anybody around you to talk to. And now you're in this community that isn't just what they're able to provide from a relationship perspective, but also able to connect you with similar minded folks.
I assume there's a lot of accounting firms in really across multiple industries where a group would claim to be a specialist in we said restaurants, manufacturing, whatever industry you're talking about. How do you know that they actually are specialists in that industry versus just saying it or assuming that they are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this comes back to maybe some best practices and diligence and just understanding, hey, can you send me 3 references? Are they in similar businesses or areas of within the restaurant space that I'm in, whether it's geographically or the type of food or experience you're providing? Can I talk to the practice leader and learn a little bit more about why they're running this and what they've created and how it's gotten built to the point of where it is today? Do you have any case studies or testimonials that you can potentially share? And then also taking a look at the breadth of services or depth of services they're able to offer their clients in that specific industry. Typically, when I go through, research in today's market, in today's world, 80% of buying decisions are done on a self-serve basis, meaning I'm going to their website, I'm looking them up on LinkedIn or Facebook or Yelp, or OpenTable, getting as much information as I possibly can in that journey, no different you would in selecting an accounting firm, and looking at what they're talking about. And if they're talking a lot on LinkedIn or Facebook about government or construction or manufacturing and nothing about restaurant or hospitality or F&B, red flag, right? Go to their website. Are they listing out industries? Are they talking deeply and putting thought leadership out there today around this type of space? And so I think it's really just coming back to best practices and doing your homework, asking the right questions and realizing, to your point, there's a lot of accounting firms out there. There's a good number of them that are specializing in this space, but knowing which ones to start talking to, I believe you can go to the restaurant CPA and they'll help you get there.
Sure. And you brought up something earlier about noise. And I found that is a huge challenge, especially when you're trying to find the right CPA partner. One website looks beautiful and has all the bells and whistles. One doesn't look as great. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of service is going to ultimately line up with, the website and what their offerings are. Have you seen situations like that?
Perception, this idea of perception is reality. It's easy to paint a pretty picture. It doesn't mean you're actually going to get the results you're trying to get, in that sense. And I think having those references and what I call social proof or testimonials or case studies on your website make all the difference in the world. Even if you go through that process, sometimes at the end of the day, it's not going to be a right fit, culturally speaking. And sometimes you have to have a lot of these types of conversations to figure that out or determine it, as part of that journey. And ultimately that comes back to the culture aspect of it, itself. And so are there things that you can do in advance to potentially, reduce the risk of running into that situation? Absolutely. Ultimately, I think what's important is if you find a trusted source, right? Referral in your local market. That's again how we got to lawyers and CPAs in many of our cases, right? Today you're doing that online. And so the way you're picking up on those signals is very different than it traditionally has been done. Again, which is why these types of sites like Restaurant CPAs or Angie's List or others that are out there when it comes to help filtering through that noise have become so critical in a market that's full of constant noise. And then a lot of times just ads and solicitation that are just trying to deviate you in a different direction.
Right. I mean, for us, the with technology, the geographic boundaries that existed for so many years have just gone away. And the value of the restaurant CPAs, which is something that was very important to me, is the ability to connect those dots across vast geographic regions, which is such a challenge often, right? When you're just looking online and you're searching for a restaurant accountant, or you're looking in all these different directions, finding the right fit can almost feel like a needle in the haystack. Often you would need a referral, but does that really exist when you're looking nationally versus locally?
I think the other thing that you're hitting on here is it's easy to be comfortable. It's easy to stay where you are at. It's easy to go the path of least resistance and hire the guy down the street because a lot of your friends have worked with them. But is that what's best for your business? And how do you determine that in your selection process, or challenge yourself to say, am I maximizing every efficiency that I possibly can? Am I paying a fee that I'm comfortable with for the results that I'm capturing or gaining? Have I been with the same person for 10 years and haven't tried to look at something different? Or I'm shifting towards growth mode and I want to find somebody that I believe is going to help me support my growth beyond a transactional compliance-based relationship.
Sure. When you're evaluating a CPA, what they're offering, what the value proposition may look like, what are some of the blind spots often that business owners or business leaders bring to the table in terms of understanding that bigger picture?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it has to do with ideas. Are you looking for somebody to help ideate, alongside with you and bring fresh, perspectives to the table? We're not just looking for reports. We're not looking just for transactional, documents, or, hey, we need to extend our deadline, that's coming up here. But have you proactively been giving me thoughts and ideas to help us strategize? How do we optimize for the future? How are we tying what you want to do from a financial perspective to our growth plans, knowing that we want to be in 3 states going forward? Do you have the capacity or the resources to help us do that, knowing what our journey is going to look like? And, again, going back to your experience, you've done so much in this space. You guys were in 2 to 3 states at that point. Every time you move the needle on the growth side, you have different needs, and you want an organization that can grow with you along those needs and provide ideas that are going to help influence the strategy going forward.
Yeah, very often, we would look at, all right, we spend this amount of money to get our taxes done for the year, when we never really valued everything else that came with it when we transitioned to SS&G, which was the restaurant leader nationally. The amount of ideas and people we've met all came from that relationship. And at each step along the way, I certainly didn't add a dollar value to each of those introductions. When I had questions and their answer was, well, let me introduce you to the CFO of this company. All of those little things would add up. And, if we were to put a value to that, would be 10 times whatever we spent on an annual basis for our basic taxes compliance work.
Yeah. And I think when you got, and I don't know if you're willing to share or open to it, but just thinking about that first time you thought about changing CPAs, right? That, hey, I'm really comfortable. I know what I'm paying. I may not be happy with these things, but it's an investment. Like, what were some of the, red flags or challenges or obstacles to keep saying, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Or was it really much easier for you to make that decision?
Well, the number one challenge are our existing relationships. There was never any actual issues with the accounting group that we worked with. They did the numbers fine to our knowledge, and we cared about them. But at the end of the day, it was a business. And we made a conscious decision, myself and our investors, to transition to a group, SS&G at the time, that were the restaurant specialist. And at that point, moving forward, the sky was the limit. Whether I was being introduced to, restaurant development conferences, introduced to executives and C-suite personnel from national restaurant groups when I had questions. shifting how we did implement our depreciation strategy
Yeah.
with the
Which
host
has
of new
unlocked a lot
restaurants
of
we were
doors.
opening.
Yeah.
We were able to save money that way. So, it was a very challenging transition, primarily because I really didn't have any problems with my old accountant.
Yeah.
I just wasn't aware of what I didn't know at the time. And for part of that reason is why I felt the restaurant CPAs was such a valuable service. There's no cost to restaurants to participate, but there's just no way you're going to have a restaurant or multiple restaurants, let's say in the Midwest, and somehow magically get a referral to an amazing group that's a perfect fit in Youngstown, Ohio. It's just an unlikely connection. So we felt that there was a lot of missed opportunities, and we could easily bridge those gaps for people. So in a sense, we're acting as what used to be your local referral. We've already done the work, and we know which accounting firms are the best at working with restaurants, and further, culturally, where we think it's going to be the right fit. So there's less guessing, less chance of making a mistake, and really wasting a lot of time and paying for something that you're not thrilled about.
Yeah. And when I heard about this, it was such a cool concept because we're seeing this happen in other areas within the accounting profession. We're seeing it in construction and these groups getting together and realizing there are experts in these spaces that can maximize our investment and relationship with them as a business owner. How do we get and navigate and break through all that noise, find them, and knowing that we're comfortable not having to go down the street or meet face to face all the time as part of that relationship. So I think your story is inspirational in that aspect, and hearing what you were able to get out of an engagement with a firm that could offer you so much in value.
What do you think one question that company leaders could ask their existing CPA to see if they're being held back?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think that is something that you really have to be thinking about going forward. Do you feel, or maybe something along the lines and of whether it's what proactive advice can you be thinking about to saving money in the next 6 months? What areas of opportunity as a restaurant owner do you think you can help or have not been explored yet when it comes to helping maximize our return? I really think it's more about specialization. Do you feel like you have expertise in the restaurant space? Do you have other clients in the restaurant space? And I know you asked for one question, but I'm just trying to wrap my hands around what is the best way to ask a current relationship. Are you maximizing my opportunity from a tax strategy perspective, given your expertise in the restaurant space?
Let me
And I
ask
think
that
that's,
question in a
yeah,
different way, if I could.
yeah.
What are some of the questions, or where would you dig to better understand if your current CPA is holding you back?
Yeah. And I
You
think
had
it just
touched
comes
earlier
back.
on the idea of being proactive, and I suppose
Yeah.
that's the idea of looking backwards, which seems to align itself more with compliance and basic tax work, right? Versus looking forward, which implies planning and strategic thinking.
I think it could start as basic as, do you feel like your firm or you have an expertise in the restaurant, hospitality, and F&B space? That's it. Have you ever even asked that question before? Right.
Sure.
I think you can, simply just start there and see what their response is. See if they're going to tell you, yes, we have deep expertise. We have 3 clients in the restaurant industry. 3. Okay. Well, out of 500 clients, that's a red flag.
That's a great point. How many other restaurants or whatever industry? How many other of those
Yeah.
companies do you work with currently?
Yeah. And I don't think you're trying to offend them. You're just trying to understand more about where their business is going. As you get educated as a restaurant owner, you realize now, if you're listening today, that there are a lot of options out there when it comes to finding the best accounting firm, small, medium, or large, that can help be an expert and trusted advisor to your business and go beyond just that compliance work. But ask the question, do you feel like you are an expert in this space? Do you have an area and niche in the restaurant industry or not? Or has this been something that, we've had a good relationship for that you continue to do and
Sure.
dive deeper into it?
Another question that comes to mind that I would ask is, can you name uh, some proactive advice that we've implemented in the
Yeah.
last 24 months um, to help me understand what the value has been? And I'd be curious, what would their response be? Because if that wasn't the case, that would be a very challenging answer to give. And I think that's a huge uh, separator between a specialized and generalist accounting firm.
Yeah.
The ability
And
to
I
look
think,
forward versus looking backwards.
and when you hit that point, like cost wise, I mean, are you investing a lot into technology or equipment or potentially both? And you're talking with your accountant about, great, we got this, you're done. Now I'm thinking the next 2-3 years about growth. I need to buy this piece of equipment. I'm looking at changing POS systems. What's your thoughts? What input do you have? Can you help me figure that out? Right. Hey, we just saw that there could be potential changes to tips and how those get reported. Where are you guys at? Are you studying that? Are you investing time into that area to learn more and how we're going to maximize that? So I think it's really asking strategic questions, knowing your business plan, knowing your business model, knowing your growth trajectory, that has to align with, the person that you have. And in some cases too, you might be going down a path of somebody that you've been working with for a while, getting a little bit older, potential retirement in the next 3 to 5 years. Don't wait till year 5 to find a new accountant. Start thinking about that today. Do they have a successor? Is this successor going to specialize in the restaurant space or not? Do you have a confidence in their bench? And so I think these are some of the things that you can assess as a good business owner at the same time, knowing that you want, some continuity as part of your growth plan.
Sure. One question that comes to mind also is, in your experience, do you see a difference in a specialized accountant versus a more generalist accountant in terms of their ability to provide support and guidance in technological investments and investments in integrations? In other words, is there a value in terms of protecting your investment made in technology in terms of having the right accountant behind you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there can be. Again, as you go through this process and start interviewing and talking to different accounting firms that have restaurant practices, some are going to be a lot more robust in that space. And if that's top of mind need for you, that might, be part of the interview process of questions you're asking during how you're vetting different selection options, right? So I do believe that they need to be able to provide value, but smaller firms might not have as deep expertise and might try to look at other resources to do that. So it's a nice to have, but ultimately, if your business model is very reliant on technology today, and that's part of your focus or priority, then you need to have a partner that's going to be able to support you with that type of knowledge and skill set.
Um, David, any last words of guidance, advice to whether it's a restaurant company or um, any group in terms of what they should be thinking about moving forward as it relates to their existing accounting relationship?
Yeah, I think, not question yourself, but make sure you're asking the right questions. I mean, make sure you're doing your homework and really thinking honestly about, do I have the right people around me to accomplish what I'm looking to build and grow? And if you don't, ultimately kind of reassess where things stand today. But there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of noise out there. We see where technology is impacting every aspect of businesses across the country, including accounting firms, including restaurants. And so I think this is the time to really think more proactively about who you're partnering with and investing with in terms of, developing that trusted advisor relationship. And there are a lot of firms out there, especially part of your platform that I've seen that I think can really add that type of value going forward. So, yeah, I think
Oh, great
that's where
points.
it's at, man.
Well, David, thank you so much for talking with me today. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I enjoyed the conversation, and I do hope we can do this again soon.
Absolutely, Andy. Thanks for having me, and look forward to watching what you guys do.
Thanks, David.
See ya.
Take care.